Welcome to Parks Associates virtual events. There are several tools in the platform to help you connect with others, interact with live sessions, and download session content. If you missed a live session, you can go back at any time to watch on demand. Go to the Watch Replays tab and click on the session that you'd like to view. Have you created your own event agenda? From the Agenda tab, click on the calendar icons to add items to your My Events schedule. You can also add sponsors and items to view later. We want you to connect with our industry-leading speakers and sponsors. Check out the Speakers tab and the Sponsors tab to meet them. Sponsors have uploaded additional materials available for download. Make sure to visit sponsor booths for any companies that interest you to chat with a member of their team. The panelists and speakers will address your questions live on the stream. Use the live discussion feature to ask your questions or answer polls. We're on the Apple App Store and Google Play Store. If you're watching any of our events on the go, you can tune in via the Parks Associates event app. Download it for quick access to any on-demand replays, to connect with other attendees at our virtual or in-person events, and keep track of your event agenda. If you need help navigating the virtual platform, please reach out to a member of our team by visiting the Parks Associates booth or by mentioning at Parks Associates in the live chat.
Throughout this year, we'll gather and share Parks Associates' latest research on the video and connected entertainment industries with insights on consumer behaviors and preferences and the challenges for the video industry in meeting these expectations. After 2 years of virtual events, we are also announcing the return of our in-person events in 2022. We hope you join us in December as we gather again for impactful sessions with insights from industry leaders and best-of-class research from Parks Associates analysts. Nothing beats the knowledge, conversations, and community that come from meeting in an in-person setting. We survey 10,000 broadband households each quarter to provide the most reliable and accurate view of the OTT, pay TV, and digital media markets. Future of Video brings together industry leaders to share insights on new trends in the video and connected entertainment industries, with insights on consumer behaviors and preferences and the challenges for the video industry in meeting these expectations. It features in-depth consumer and industry research on OTT services, the value of content, and best strategies for building successful video services for today's connected consumers. Hello everyone, welcome to today's Parks Associates Future Video Session, OTT Churn, Marketing and Retention Strategies. To give you a brief overview of how today's going to go, I'll kick things off with my insight and view into the market, and then I'll dive into our opening panel discussion on the role of the smart TV in driving viewers with Cameron Lofty of Gracenote, James Rondell of Bitmovin, Mark Young of Fandango and NBC Universal, and Fariba Zamanian of TiVo. Then Parks Associates President and CMO Elizabeth Parks will conduct our fireside chat executive Q&A with Ashwin Navin of Samba TV. And then my colleague Eric Sorensen will lead a packed panel discussion on consumer engagement, maintaining and growing customers with Peter Doherty of Think Analytics, Philippe Guelton of Crackle Plus, Sharita Johnson of Peloton Interactive, Naveen Naranian of First Light Media, and Greg Riker of Comcast. And at the end of each panel, we'll have audience Q&A with the speakers. So I'd like to encourage our audience to submit your Q&A questions for our panelists via swap card, or via the app interface, at any time during our discussions so they're ready for us to address when we finish each panel. And we'd like to take a moment to first thank our sponsors that make today's session and the future video series possible. Our research partners IDEA, FPT, and Symphony Media AI, and our platinum sponsors, Comcast Technology Solutions and Metrological. Thank you all for your support of Future Video. And we want to also thank our media and industry association supporters who make today possible as well. Our platinum supporters Connected Design, From the Ground Up Living Lab, the Media Institute, and the Z-Wave Alliance, and our additional supporters, Construction Tech Review, EnergyCom.il, the Home Grid Forum, Innovation in Tech Today, Residential Tech Today, and the Monitoring Association. Thank you all for supporting Future Video. And just to give you a view of what we got in store for the rest of this year, our next event is July 21st on personalization and a new video viewer. And over the course of this year, we'll also delve into digital piracy and distribution, and we'll have a return to an in-person event in December for our final Future Video event to cap off this year. So be sure to join us throughout the year for a full slate of thought-provoking Future Video sessions with in-depth insights from decision makers across the industry. Also, if this is your first time interacting with us, keep in mind that Parks Associates is an independent market research firm in business for over 35 years that specializes in covering emerging consumer technologies, and you'll see some of that research throughout our sessions today. So please let us know if we can help guide your strategic decision-making and product planning in any way. And we've got a full slate of valuable insight and perspective on tap today with 2 discussion panels and some terrific panelists lined up for you. So I'd like to kick things off by laying the groundwork for today's 2 panel discussions from the Parks Associates perspective based on our survey research of 10,000 U.S. broadband households. And we'll take a look at what the market situation is today, and then I'll briefly touch on the significance of TVs today, factors that influence subscribership or retention, and a number of other issues to help prime our discussions to follow. Before I begin, just a brief intro. I'm Paul Erickson. I'm the Research Director for the Parks Associates Entertainment team, covering entertainment topics, consumer electronics, and related technologies. And in my close to 2 decades as an analyst, I've covered the video market from both the consumer and service provider ends of the spectrum. And our topics today are especially top of mind these days for today's consumers, and I outlined some of the most notable aspects of the video market based on our research as a backdrop for those discussion topics that will follow. First, we've talked plenty about how streaming is everywhere today, and subscription OTT services are in 83% of households, and more than half of households have 4 or more subscriptions. But Netflix's recent announcements have given everyone in the industry pause, so we wanted to show some of these changes in the market that are taking place to give relative context. Legacy pay TV is still a significant factor in the TV market today, and pay TV overall is still a top method of viewing. OTT growth has meant fragmentation in the market has continued to rise thanks to the proliferation of all the streaming services out there. And the market is crowded and getting even more crowded with new entrants, new partnerships, and new business models to keep up with all of the changes in the market. And this is just a fraction that you see here of all the brands and services that are available. And with all of this competition and variety, how are consumers responding to all of this choice? Today, people are extending themselves beyond just the big three services to address their content demands. 61%, the majority of OTT subscribers today, subscribe to both a mix of the top three and other services. And this is almost the opposite of the situation 3 years ago, where the majority satisfied their content needs with just one or more of the big three services. And the OTT medium offers access to an incredible variety of content, and consumers have embraced that diversity of access to satisfy their needs. The downside of exposure to all of that variety and familiarity with it is consumer overload of choice, a desire for simplicity, and a larger potential for consumers to stray and churn away. But before we touch on that issue of churn, let's first take a look at what people are actually watching all of these services on, and if there's any devices that they prefer over another. Smart TVs are the most important streaming device to focus on for the industry. And they're now in active use in 60% of US broadband households. And from our findings, they're the most favored primary device for streaming video consumption in the home. Parks Associates research confirms that smart TVs are the top device in terms of total weekly hours of usage and are also the hardware platform with the most balanced consumption between service provider viewing, SVOD, and AVOD. That said, other devices are still important contributors in a consumer consumption environment that is still firmly multi-device in nature. And we have a lot of data on that multi-device consumption dynamic, but for the sake of time, the major takeaway here is that smart TVs are now the most important centerpiece and point of entertainment aggregation and consumption in the home today. There's at least one nuance to this to contend with, though. Smart TV engagement and deployment strategies also have to contend with the differences of smart TV platforms. 4 streaming platforms dominate this picture: Samsung Tizen, LG WebOS, Vizio SmartCast, and Roku TV. These 4 platforms collectively comprise 79% of consumers' primary TVs, and Samsung leads all vendors with 41%. These 4 have maintained stable dominance of the US smart TV market for years, as illustrated by the figure here. And while the aforementioned 4 players platforms control a huge chunk of the market, it's clear that services and service providers still must support distribution to a broad variety of software platforms in order to maximize their total reach in this competitive landscape. Additionally, service providers and content owners must also contend with all the differences between each platform of how the UX is presented, how discovery takes place, how advertising and promotion can be executed, and other variables with each platform that can fundamentally affect the engagement strategy and viewing experience of the consumer. And while content is king and essential to subscriber acquisition, engagement, and retention, let's look even deeper. It's not just content that truly matters, but variety of that content that's king. And whether it's within a single service, via bundles, via aggregation, or some other method, content variety and diversity add an additional layer of a service's appeal to consumers, and it simplifies their choice of services. Viewers dedicate an average of 70% of their viewing to services with a broad variety of content. And over 1/3 of viewers dedicate over 3/4 of their time to services with varied content. And in today's highly competitive and churn-prone environment, every engagement advantage counts, and maximizing content variety and diversity on both the acquisition and distribution ends of the equation will help maximize subscriber engagement and retention. Speaking of retention, let's look at an important element of that, which is subscriber satisfaction. 40% of OTT subscribers report that all of their OTT services, or some or more of their OTT services, are bundled through a home service provider, And people are looking for simplicity. Getting their services through their broadband provider is one of the ways they are flocking to simplifying their experience. And these consumers that do so, they have a higher NPS score than those who don't, and subscribers to streaming TV tend to have faster internet speeds on average. It's a win for consumers seeking simplicity, and it's a win for service providers seeking tighter lock-in and higher ARPU. Looking further at the power of bundling and how consumers are responding, 59% of consumers prefer bundles that combine streaming services with other household subscriptions. Let's also keep in mind that the more services that consumers take from a single source, the stickier that relationship with that source is. So bundling is in the interest of both the streaming and service provider industries. And as organic subscription growth becomes harder to come by, the future of further viewership and subscription growth in the streaming market won't just be from adapting new business models. It'll come from stronger bundled propositions to the consumer. Something else of interest to service providers here in regards to bundled OTT services that we've seen here from our Parks Associates research is that consumers with more value-added services tend to be happier, and they're more likely to recommend their internet service provider to others than those without such services bundled. Bundles of services, therefore, such as OTT services in this case, drive greater satisfaction. So we expect to see that more service providers are going to be bundling OTT as a differentiator, as a value add, and as an ARPU driver, along with other types of services in the near future. Bundling increases stickiness, which is important when you consider the role of churn in the OTT sector. Churn is always top of mind for OTT services because a glut of service choices and no contracts makes leaving a service easy. And it's inherently high for OTT services, and it continues to rise. However, one interesting dynamic is that the continued drop in churn for the vMVPD service subset of OTT services is evident. Pay TV services like YouTube TV, Hulu with Live TV, Philo, Fubo TV, and similar are showing decreasing levels of churn. And this aligns with overwhelmed consumers now desiring some level of simplicity and simplification through bundled and aggregated offerings and having a variety of content available. Similarly, bundled broadband, unified billing, and other avenues, as previously discussed, can also tap into this desire for simplification that consumers are exhibiting. And we'll explore more about subscriber engagement, satisfaction, and retention in our second discussion panel focusing on the topic later today. But getting back to churn, let's explore some of the reasons why people churn as our last preface to that discussion. 2 out of the top 5 reasons related to churn, they concern content, including the top reason, finishing watching the show that was liked or sought out. And the other 3 out of the top 5 relate to price, cost, or value. And thus, the major implications here are essentially that services may be able to preempt churn to a degree by delivering a constant supply of relevant content from their portfolios and doing it within a pricing model that delivers high perceived value to the customer base. But this proposition is only part of the equation, however, and we'll look more deeply at that in the discussions to come. Let's finally consider why people don't churn, even though they have reservations that cause them to not recommend the service, which is an interesting nuance that few have explored, but we've specifically looked into. And the 3 standout reasons are: a service is liked by others in a household, it has high value perception, and it has exclusivity of content. And this aligns well with the factors triggering churn that I just discussed. Content variety and exclusivity and high perceived value are thus strong factors in staving off churn. But this just scratches the surface of the dynamics of why people stay subscribed, and we'll expand further into the topic of what it takes to retain customers in our second discussion panel later today, led by my colleague Eric Sorensen. Now that I've briefly covered the state of the OTT market and highlighted selected aspects of consumption, satisfaction, and churn from our research, I've laid the backdrop for our discussions to follow. So now I'm happy to lead our first discussion on the role of the smart TV in driving viewers, and we have a great lineup with a mix of perspectives on the topic. We have Cameron Lofty, VP of Product for Gracenote, James Varndell, Director of Product Management at Bitmovin, Mark Young, SVP of Global Strategy, Business and Corporate Development at Fandango and NBC Universal, and VP of Growth Strategy at NBC Universal, and Fariba Zamanian, VP of Data and Advertising at TiVo. And I'll be handling the moderating duties for today. So let's take a moment to have each of our panelists introduce themselves. First, we have Cameron Lofty from Gracenote. Cameron, welcome. Tell us a bit about your role at Gracenote.
Thanks, Paul. Welcome. I'm glad to be here. So Gracenote overall is focused on powering metadata and ID spaces in discovery algorithms in the TV, movie, and music platform space. So we provide rich media, schedule availability, universal data and distribution to power consumer electronics, service providers, automakers, and content providers. My role specifically there is in focus on our advanced discovery suite, which is really helping power the next generation of search and discovery. We think in today's world where you've hyper choice and content proliferation, that you need the next level to be successful. And we think the algorithms have gotten so much better over the past few years, but the metadata is the area that the fuel that ultimately makes them be successful. And that's the part that hasn't kept up. So we've launched our advanced discovery suite to really help address a couple problems in that area, which is how do we help the algorithms, as I mentioned, be more successful? Visual merchandising, because if you provide the right recommendations, but you don't merchandise it in a way that appeals to the consumers. And then finally, how do we help the consumer be part of that journey? So those are the areas we're focused on. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Cameron. We also have James Varndell from Bitmovin here joining us. James, can you tell us a bit about your role as Director of Product Management at Bitmovin?
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul, and thanks for having me on the panel today. At Bitmovin, we provide video infrastructure for digital media companies and streaming services. That includes video encoding, player, and analytics. And in my role as Director of Product Management, I focus on Bitmovin's playback products, so including video playback, analytics, and also testing capabilities through our Streamlabs solution. I think overall, we have a lot of touch points with smart TVs, mostly on the technology side, so helping streaming services to deliver great playback experiences on smart TVs. Through that work and through our analytics product, we also get a lot of insights into the challenges and also opportunities associated with smart TVs in today's consumer environment. That also includes performance on smart TVs and how streaming services are testing and optimizing for viewer engagement and retention on smart TVs. So overall, we get quite deep into the technical challenges of smart TVs, but also we're helping streaming services to realize some of the opportunities on smart TV platforms, and really looking forward to talking about some of those today.
Great, thank you, James. We're also joined by Mark Young of Fandango and NBC Universal. Mark, thanks for joining us. Can you give us a sense of what you do across Fandango and NBC Universal?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Absolutely. So you may not know that actually Fandango has a constellation of properties, including Vudu on the transactional video on demand space, as well as Rotten Tomatoes. And so my role is really looking at this entertainment marketplace that services consumers around awareness, discovery, planning, buying, sharing. And we really look at it as a continuum across both in and out of home viewing. And then I also play a role looking at broader growth opportunities across other NBCU properties.
Thank you, Mark. And our final member of the panel today is Fariba Zamanian from TiVo. Good to have you here, Fariba. Tell us a bit about your role as VP of Data and Advertising at TiVo.
Hi there. It's great to be part of this discussion today. Thanks so much. I think that TiVo is a very recognized name, and I think there's a lot that the industry doesn't know about TiVo. But really, at our core is that we have a long history of bringing technology to television, and in today's world with the smart TV, by bringing entertainment together, making it easier for consumers to find, watch, and enjoy. I think our heritage and what we're best known about is our powered set-top boxes and DVRs, bringing the first one to market over 25 years ago, which is now advanced into operating systems that fuel cable set-top boxes, and now into the broadband-only space with IPTV. Our software also powers the interactive guide that enables the discovery process for programming, both scheduled as well in the app-based world. We've brought forward some new products in recent days called TiVo Plus, which helps bring together the aggregated AVOD services for consumers to find that free programming that's now available in abundance, and we're going to talk about today. We introduced our first media player a couple of years ago called the Stream 4K, which is going to serve as the basis for a new announcement that we just recently made at the NAB about TiVo entering into the smart TV space by bringing an OS platform into the connected TV environment in late 23 into 24. But for myself specifically, what myself and my team have done is harness the power that comes from all of these great products that we've brought forward by aggregating the data, as well as enabling monetization capabilities through our owned and operated platforms for advertising, especially today with connected TV. So very excited to be a part of this incredible point of evolution in our industry.
Thank you, Fariba. And it's great to have all of you here today with all of your different industry perspectives. And before we begin, a quick reminder for our audience, please submit your Q&A questions for the panel through the interface as they come up while we're speaking, and we can dive right into them at the end during our Q&A. So with that, let's dive right into our discussion. And I'm going to lead off with kind of a broad question to start everything off with. And from your perspective, those of you on the panel, how significant an opportunity do you see with smart TVs in terms of being able to drive engagement and retention, and why? And I guess, Fariba, how about you lead off with this question?
Sure, happy to. And yeah, it's an incredibly significant opportunity. I mean, it makes me think about, our history. There wasn't an innovation as quickly adopted as the black and white television was back in 1955, where, half of US households quickly adopted, a black and white TV because of our fascination and hunger for entertainment and to bring it in the home. Especially in an immersive experience where it's on a large screen today. Back then, of course, black and white. So I remember having one that was this big. But it's about bringing that entertainment experience in the home and having that, access to entertainment throughout the course of the day. And, the smart TV has really revolutionized and reinvigorated that experience that we had back when it was first introduced, in that now a smart TV brings to the table that ability to connect directly to the internet and have a seamless experience similar to what, our fascination and rapid adoption of the smartphone. So I think when we think about, the smart TV and the rapid adoption, as you mentioned, where 6 out of 10 homes now have at least one, is that we have a history of knowing that we need to follow the consumer. And this adoption of the smart TV and the innovation that it's brought forward and the connectivity and access to this plethora of content that can be accessed whether through paid subscription or as a free service or scheduled programming through a paid TV provider, is that now we're at this crossroad where we've got this overload of content, but a need for, as you mentioned earlier, Paul, is this simplicity and this unified experience that can help us as consumers navigate through all of that content in a seamless experience that makes it easier to find, watch, and enjoy. And I think that this opportunity, we're right there in terms of the smart TV, is that it has the capability from the platforms that drive them to bring that unified experience. And to drive engagement, what we need is to offset churn. So you touched on a lot of those key points, and the one being, simplicity. All of these different apps have different UIs. The experience are different. Consumers get overloaded. So that ability to have access and the smart TV presents that is certainly a key component to drive the engagement. And I think the second part of that is really the personalization aspect. And what we found through our search and our discovery product is that those that are using personalization, or consumers that leverage content that is being recommended and use it, are 3 times less likely to churn. So there's a lot to be learned about the kind of content and the recommendations and that high intent among those consumers that are likely to stick through and engage and view more, and also do so at those day parts that are going to be more engaging or more where they'll be more likely to stick around and view. So I think the smart TV is an incredible revolution and evolution of the television set. And now it's a matter of meeting the demands of consumers and anticipating them with this continued innovation. I think companies like TiVo are really trying to look to bring that unified experience and address that personalization to really drive engagement.
Thank you, Fariba. Cameron from Gracenote, I'd love to hear your input on this one.
Thanks, Paul. So if you step back and think about, as she mentioned, 46% of consumers are saying it's hard to find, what they want to look for. And a lot of times it's a referral from a friend or something. So the challenge is there's so much content out there. And ultimately it's a zero-sum game. So as a consumer, you're going to watch one service or another, or you're going to watch it on a Roku box or on your smart TV, your Prime Video. So the question is really, how can I find the right content and surface that relevant content for the consumer in a way that engages them? I do think that it's an incredible opportunity for the smart TV manufacturers, especially since they're closest to the glass. This is a great position to ultimately, there's no hardware to buy or application to install. So it's a great position there. And especially you bring that TV home and you fire it up there. But the key again is to really drive that consumer experience. So as we mentioned before, you're really struggling as a consumer to what to watch, and there's a little bit of fear of missing out. So creating that relevant experience, helping them with the discovery process is the key. And of course, as a data company, we believe that it's a mix of algorithms and the powerful metadata that ultimately drives those solutions to create success.
Thank you, Cameron. I think, Mark, from the Fandango and NBC Universal perspective, I'm very interested in what your thoughts are on the potential for the smart TV.
Yeah, so I agree with what all the comments have been made so far. I'd add a few things. One is I think that, more recently you've seen companies like Roku and even X-Class, which is Comcast TV operating system, building the purpose-built functionality into the hardware and software so that the capabilities of the TV now can handle many more use cases that are friendly to that kind of specific combination of hardware and software. The other thing I would add is that we're seeing success where the metadata that's ingested into the electronic programming guides, into universal search, really allows that consumer to look at their entitlements, whether you have subscription on one service or you want to actually look at maybe pay as you go, where Vudu has a transactional video on demand service, so that you can ultimately provide consumers different choice along the continuum of what they either subscribe to or where they want to pay as you go. I think what we've also seen, we're the home entertainment native service for Roku, as well as X-Class. And when you look at the research that we've done, I think with the obsession of SVOD today, people lose sight that there's a whole consumer consumption pattern around AVOD, TVOD, PVOD, SVOD, all the acronyms. And so Roku does a good job, and so does X-Class, to make sure that consumers still know the availability of titles and windows and availability for entitlements, but utilizing that electronic programming guide and that universal search as a way to anchor consumers' discovery.
Great. Thanks, Mark. I'm going to, for the sake of time, I think, move to the next question. And I think it builds on the last one, and it's an important one to ask. I think as we look to the smart TV as the most important device in the household for video consumption and aggregation, what do you see significant consumer pain points that still exist that are yet to be solved by the content services, like video services, that is, or broadband service provider sectors that can potentially drive even higher levels of viewership and engagement if they're solved? And Cameron, I'd love to hear your perspective on this one to start.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Paul. I think the key is really, again, overabundance of content. So you've got to create that personalized experience to connect the viewers to the content they most likely want to enjoy. So if you look at the search and discovery experience, Search is certainly a challenging problem across multiple services, but we think that that is a problem that can be solved. There is ways to determine what's in different streaming catalogs and to aggregate that together. Right now, the challenge around discovery is even bigger, in that it's a challenging situation to understand, well, how does the consumer discover content? The best analogy I can think of is it's a little bit of like an e-commerce experience. It's a considered purchase. So you have the awareness, you have the consideration, and you finally ultimately watch content. So in order to do that, you need to figure out more nuanced recommendations, more personalization, as we were talking about, in visual merchandising to drive that. So once you surface the right recommendations that are very nuanced for the user, understanding where their headspace is at the moment and what they're looking to watch, ultimately, then you need to visually merchandise that. That's an area that we're slowly starting to get into as an industry. So we're no longer in a world where you're stuck with a set-top box, or sorry, a digital box of a DVD where you have one image. How do we visually merchandise that in a way that appeals to consumers? Because we know there's multiple aspects to different programs. So for example, something like Last of the Mohicans, if you look at basically the poster art for that, it shows Daniel Day-Lewis running with a musket and a hatchet in his hand. But anyone that's seen that movie would realize there's a very big love component to that story. But if you're, again, a recommendation engine surfacing that and saying, okay, the love aspect is why I would want to watch that as a consumer, ultimately you wouldn't get that from the poster art. So for example, we've launched personalized imagery to focus and help drive that. And we've actually seen some pretty good increases in terms of 11% increase in time spent on the titles, and also a lift in terms of the titles watched with that. So visual merchandising, providing the right recommendations. And I think ultimately these are made possible by broad, deep, rich metadata and IDs, along with powerful algorithms that ultimately would drive that experience. So.
Thanks, Cameron. For Reba, your thoughts on remaining pain points to solve for the consumer when it comes to smart TVs?
Yeah, I think just to add on to what Cameron said, it really is about that bringing that unified content and discovery experience to the consumer, and I think that's something that TiVo focused on addressing with the launch of our Stream 4K, which brings scheduled content as well as app-based content into that single view for recommendation or discovery process across, host of genres, depending on the profile of the individual. So I think there's still work to do in terms of understanding the personalization component to ensure that that tie-in of scheduled programming as well as the app-based SVOD or AVOD is also available as a recommendation. Certainly then ties into some of those elements that Cameron mentioned of different components of that content. They may actually fit better with certain profiles versus another. So there's certainly that pain point is major, and which drives a lot of the churn, certainly across both types. But I think the other that we haven't talked about is the quality. So as you're bringing this content, you do such an incredible job in the discovery process, through TiVo's and Grace Notes, compatible metadata and discovery services, is that once we get them on the show or the program, the quality is one that needs to engage and drive a repeat. Repeat purchasing is repeat viewing on that service. So what we've learned through research that we've conducted at TiVo is the perception of quality for SVOD is significantly higher than the AVOD quality content, in somewhere of 60% perception versus 40%. And we've also seen that for AVOD programming, they tend to watch snippets and are not really engaged throughout an entire program, whether it's 30 or 60 minutes long. And on average, I found that they stick around for about 10 to 12 minutes, and that's not happening in prime time. So services like Roku, with recent announcements through the new fronts this week, and certainly lots of promotion around it, are bringing original content to counter that and get retention, because obviously the monetization opportunity is really the driving force. is that we need to raise the bar on the quality because the expectation is there. And I think the adoption of AVOD in particular has a lot of room for growth because of what we see and sees right now in Europe with SVOD services being cut back at a larger rate than previously, given economic constraints that we're experiencing around the globe. So I think the opportunity presents itself to address the quality and really drive what could be a very high engagement environment, combined with the personalization as well as the discovery, as mentioned.
Paul, I have an example of a pain point we're trying to solve, if I may, if there's
Sure.
time. We think that there's a pain point with consumers around awareness and discovery from the perspective of collapsing what you want to watch to watching it. And so we have a fast channel that we've deployed that's under our brand Rotten Tomatoes. That's a combination of what to watch as well as fandom content. It's a combination of short form licensed clips as well as original content. And so we're working with smart TV manufacturers that service is on, which is over a dozen now, to deep link into whatever service that you have entitlements or where you want to watch that content. So you don't have to actually go outside of a trailer you're watching or a interview show with a behind the scenes of a movie. That emotional connection that you have, I want to watch that. We're working with deep linking into the actual watching immediately.
Excellent. And I think, I think on my end, I think there's so much potential in the smart TV because you have all of that consumption taking place on a single device, right? So it's a huge store of data that can be leveraged either within the super aggregated experience or within the individual services app experience to deliver that smarter, better, more engaged experience with smarter recommendations or higher quality recommendations. And so I think there's a lot of potential there in the smart TV use case or in that consumption use case that might not have been possible before just because of the state of technology today and how much unified consumption behavior is taking place on that TV, whether it's broadcast, streaming, if it's a bespoke pay TV service or it's gameplay. So I think there's a lot of data there to be leveraged for those smarter, better, higher quality recommendations and that more continued, highly engaged experience. But I think what would be interesting to ask here as a follow-up to this question would be to see what our audience said, because we asked our audience, we put an audience polling question out there where we asked our audience where they thought the biggest remaining problems or pain points to solve were when it came to driving higher consumer engagement on smart TVs. And we asked them whether it was the UX or interface, too many or too disruptive ads, the remote controls, unintuitive voice search or voice control, overall confusion, or everyone's favorite, other. And our responses there were distinct in that by far the top two answers were the UX and interface and too many or too disruptive ads. They scored equally, the top two. So any thoughts from those of you on the panel, whether this surprises you or it's what you expected?
I think,
Feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I'll come in here, Paul. I mean, I think in terms of the user experience, that's not so surprising to me. I think what we see today is some of the market-leading streaming services, they're supporting at least sort of 24 different devices with dedicated apps. So I think there is becoming a recognition that the user experience and the viewer experience on a smart TV is fundamentally quite different to a web browser or a mobile device or a connected TV device, for example. I think one sort of challenge that we see from teams that we work with is, when each smart TV or each device uses a different technology, a different set of APIs, a different user experience, for example, it can be really, really challenging to deliver a consistent experience across all platforms and all smart TVs. It's much easier when there's some commonality and a common layer across all devices. But we don't really see that today. Every smart TV operates quite differently from a technology perspective. And I think that causes some challenges when it comes to building a consistent user experience, especially with a small development team that many streaming services have.
I'll add to that. I think the other pain points of that consistent experience is back to a unified way to think about how these different partners that come into the smart TV, whether you're the hardware operating system or the service provider, have a single view of the identity of who you are, and also a credit card or some payment mechanism on file. And today there's a lot of different approaches on that, whether you have an open view or a closed view of your own ecosystem. But I think that that's a big challenge today too.
Thanks, Mark. And let's jump back into our questions here so we can get a few more out before we run up against time, because there's a lot of really good content to cover here. I think the question I also wanted to ask is relevant to today, especially when consumers are out there and buying devices and looking at the interfaces on these devices, because the industry is certainly talking about not just aggregation of content, but super aggregation as a way to address consumer overload of choice in content and services, and as a way to kind of optimize that viewing experience, that consumption experience, for more seamless and continuous engagement. And is this a valid problem to solve at the smart TV UX level, or should it be solved somewhere else in the experience? Is it a problem for the platform owners to address? Is it a problem for the services to address, or is there a collaborative effort that's needed to address the need for aggregation or simplification to evolve this experience into something that's as sticky as possible for consumers? Mark, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think we're seeing good collaboration today, whether you call it co-opetition or partnering across companies. Our parent company, Comcast, has all the major services on Xfinity. And, certainly when you think about that competing with first-party services, there's ways to provide consumers choice. I think also when we look at what I mentioned, our role in Roku's environment, we happen to be transactional, but they've got AVOD and SVOD. And that's another way to think about simplifying for consumers, that they don't have to go to multiple places. It's all there for you in the user interface. But I do think there's a lot of room to improve. The question, I think, comes back to when you look at the strategies of different companies along the value chain, where are they capturing value? Because I think ultimately a lot of the smart TV value is manifesting in the move from linear television, the $60 billion advertising business, and capturing that on CTVs, which is, increasing. So when you look at what role you're playing, Samsung's doing, a big piece of the pie now around advertising, as well as other TV manufacturers. And what does that implicate when you start to think about ways to unify, or is that further disaggregation because there's more of an ecosystem play across each partner?
Great. Thanks, Mark. James, from BitMovin, what's your perspective on this? Where do we take care of the simplification and aggregation desire from consumers? At what level do we take care of this, and what kind of collaboration is needed?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would also just reflect back a little bit on the importance of this topic. Ultimately, through aggregation, the aim is to present content to viewers in a way that's easy to navigate, and ultimately increase retention and reduce churn as a result. I mean, I think that's some of the data you showed right at the beginning of the session in terms of the importance of this. I think in some way we're seeing aggregation potentially in two different places. Within the apps which run on the smart TVs and aggregate services. So, for example, I might watch Stars Play through Apple TV, their app running on my smart TV. But there's also the smart TV operating system itself as the aggregator. So if you look at something like a Video Smartcast, for example, who are growing users quite rapidly, and actually, I believe, generating more revenue from their operating system than from the hardware TV sales business, that really brings a question over whether there may be some future tension between the smart TV operating system itself and the manufacturer and the app's developers in terms of who is aggregating the content. But they would need to work together to solve this challenge, we believe. But that will really help to define where the user experience around aggregation is going to be delivered, whether it's through dedicated apps or through the smart TV OS. I think one thing that we see that's very clear from our perspective is that app developers and TV manufacturers really do need to work together to deliver the highest quality playback. So here we're talking about things like HDR, 4K, 60 frames per second, the latest codecs, the best, most integrated user experience with all of the different interaction ways and modes you can have with a smart TV, like gesture and voice control, for example. But when we think about aggregation, one challenge you kind of immediately run into is the testing aspect. So testing your app, your aggregated services across all smart TV devices becomes really, really challenging, especially when you consider consumers at home are watching across TVs from 2016, for example, all the way up to the latest devices launched in 2022. So I think at a technology level, there's a lot of need for collaboration, and at the user experience level, there's a need for integration between the smart TV operating systems and the app developers themselves. And ultimately, if those two can work together, that's going to help to improve the stickiness of streaming services for consumers.
Thank you, James. Cameron, what are your thoughts on how to really improve that experience for consumers, and where do we solve this need for aggregation and simplicity for consumers?
Yes, as Mark and James were saying, I think at the end of the day, the consumers want that content first model. They want to be able to see their relevant content. And super aggregation is great because to a consumer, it doesn't matter anymore whether it's on a linear service or it's a streaming service, an AVOD service. They just want to be able to watch their content when they want to watch it. Years ago, we were in a linear world where you pretty much had to be home and have your TV on if you wanted to watch something. Then we started being able to DVR it. And now we're in a place where people just want to watch it whenever they want to watch it. Certainly, the aggregator is the solution for that. It's super aggregator really solves the search problem. Discovery is still really challenging because of all that content. So in some ways, actually, when you super aggregate all that content, it makes it even more challenging to discover the content. Instead of 2,000 pieces of content to look at in maybe one streaming service, you have 5,000, 10,000. And today, you can look pretty much any show you can think of. If you can think of it, you can find out where to watch that. So it's a really challenging problem around discovery. And as I go back to the sort of analogy with e-commerce, which, years ago had the same problem, which is, before you go into a store and you had, 10 pairs of shoes to look at, now you have hundreds or thousands of pairs of whatever product you want to buy available. And so the funnel has become a much more important part of that. How do you raise awareness? At the end of the day, how do you help considerations? So things like reviews, descriptions, previews, all of this stuff is really built in to help that consumer with that aggregation problem of, okay, let me tell you about a show that's coming up in the future. So I think there's definitely an opportunity for at the smart TV UX level to solve this problem. I do think that other services are working on that, and will ultimately the consumer is demanding that this problem be solved. So it can be solved at multiple levels there.
Thanks, Cameron. I think you bring up an interesting issue, which is that with super aggregation, I think to some degree, I won't say it's an eventuality, but from my perspective as an analyst, I see it happening as a aggregate change or evolution of what we are seeing on all of our various streaming devices, right? So all of the different platform owners have either begun to super aggregate their user experience or in the process of doing so. And if we think of that as an eventuality, then yes, there's going to be an even greater issue of how and where to essentially surface your content, to make search and discovery easier, to make it more intuitive. How is it expressed in each of those different user experiences from the different platform owners? And I think there's a lot of moving pieces to that hopefully come together, right? So you've got the application developers, you've got the platform owners, and of course you've got the services themselves and how much data they're willing to share to really help power the quality of this super aggregated experience, and by extension, how intuitive that discovery experience is going to be. So I'm hopeful that all of this collaboration will take place, and that in a year, probably not a year, but at least over the next few years, that we really do see this glut or overload of content and choices that consumers are experiencing now that it's relieved in a very intuitive way at the device level, or I'm sorry, at the experience level for consumers.
I can highlight an area of collaboration that I think is working well across the value chain. And, it's sounds like a plug, but, Rotten Tomatoes on the web, that everyone's used to looking at reviews. We also have a affiliate model with all the major service providers and aggregators, if you will, where to watch. So our role is to help consumers discover what to watch, and then we deep link out to where to watch. And we're seeing great evidence of that's working. But I also mentioned before, being on the smart TV with our fast channel, I think is the right medium with video on a smart TV and helping that discovery from intent to action. So we're hopeful that collaboration will continue.
Excellent. Well, I'm for the sake of time, I'm going to jump to our next question, and I'm going to put each of you on the spot a little bit because I do want to also have time for our audience Q&A. And I don't want to skip this question either because it's very, very relevant to the market now because it deals with ad-supported services. So if you can, we'll make this a lightning round. Everybody chip in for a minute or so we can get to some audience Q&A questions. How does the rapid growth of ad-supported services, so AVOD and particularly FAST services now, and their pre-integration into every major smart TV platform, impact or alter smart TV engagement and viewership strategies? Fariba, you're up first.
I mean, as I mentioned before, it's an incredible opportunity to drive engagement. Consumers are willing to sit through commercials. We see SVOD services like Netflix now launching ad-supported versions. So I don't think the question that people don't want commercials is there, and their receptivity to AVOD programming is certainly there, as we've seen the increase in viewership continue to grow as it becomes available. The challenge is retention, and that is a combination of quality and recommendation or personalized experiences or recommendations that will engage them not just for a longer duration, but throughout the course of the day and not just snippets.
Thank you, Fariba. James, what are your thoughts on how ad-supported services are affecting smart TV engagement and viewership strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the opportunity there is a really significant one, and it's really to reach consumers who maybe are saturated with the number of existing subscriptions they have. They can't budget to add another subscription service with the pressures on everybody's kind of consumer wallet today, rising costs in a number of areas. So I think ad-supported services have the opportunity to reach viewers who otherwise wouldn't be able to take out a additional subscription on top of the services they're already subscribing to. I think, interestingly, reflecting back on the first kind of poll that you ran, around how to engage viewers with ads, I think we're seeing a growing recognition that the user experience on smart TVs does need to be different, and the approach for ads also needs to be different on smart TVs. And potentially I could see in the future dedicated smart TV user experiences that takes advantage of the different ways that you can interact with the smart TV, like through voice control, gesture control, pointer style remote controls, and a recognition that a different playback user experience is needed on TVs to deliver ads as well as main content compared to, for example, mobile devices, connected devices, or web browsers.
Thank you, James. Mark, what's your quick take on the growth of ad-supported services and how they affect viewership and engagement?
Well, I think they're expanding the pie. I mean, I think if you look at it from a segmentation, a cohort, whether you talk about what the panel mentioned is, there's a upper bound in terms of wallet share, and, people want to actually access more content, but not, have more recurring fees they have to pay. I think it has a great role in that. I think the question is there opportunity to continue to look at premium content, which has a price for production, and look at, how do you make sure a consumer, when you're looking at a service that has both AVOD and, premium subscription, how you marry those two together and make sure that there's an upward bound of upsell if people want more content without ads.
Excellent. And last up, Cameron, do you have a quick take on the rise of FAST and AVOD services?
I do. I mean, think about it, unique or original content is what's driving viewership. So Roku has TRC, Amazon has Prime Originals, even streaming services are now going after sports rights. So Apple TV now has Major League Baseball, Amazon has Thursday Night Football. So that unique content is what's driving that viewership. So the ability to spin up fast channels or AVOD in a low cost, efficient way, I think is a great opportunity for them to differentiate themselves, because you can create so much of that content and then personalize it to specific taste communities that are using your service. I think discovery is still a challenge, but I think this is a great opportunity for them.
Thank you, Cameron. And on my part, I'll chip in very quickly. I agree with all of you, right? I mean, if we think about the growth of the market thus far, and where we're seeing organic subscription growth slow down, and look to how we evolve streaming viewership over the years and possibly the decade to come, a lot of it is going to be about democratizing that access to a lot of people who can't afford a full price service or can't afford a service. And ultimately, if we think about the reach of broadcast, right, and how do we bring in a equivalent of that to democratize access to streaming services, and it's going to be the ad-supported avenue. So really, it's the next evolution in branching out and bringing in all of those other people into the fold, from all of the different segments of the population that thus far have not been willing or have not been able to afford what's been out there so far. So I think it's a really great opportunity for the market to reach into even more households. So with that, I am going to wind down the discussion and instead try to fit in 2 or 3 of our audience Q&A questions. So let's go with interesting. Hold on. Let's instead go with let's try this one. Actually, could you go back? Does the consumer really care or discern between the smart TV being the main I/O device, or the smart TV being the device for the interface for consoles and streaming devices? I mean, is there a real preference there?
I'll jump in and say I think the consumer is looking for that best experience. So whoever can provide that aggregated experience with the content first, provide the best discovery, the best search, is the one that ultimately, whether that's the connected device or a smart TV, I think the consumer will drive that. So this is a great opportunity. Whoever is able to solve that problem in the best way will ultimately win that battle.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, but I also think it depends on the cohort. If you're a gamer and that's your orientation and you're playing through a gaming device, you're going to probably lean more on that. But at the same extent, I think it also comes down to the onboarding. I think today on smart TVs, they're doing a pretty good job, out of the box experience and getting you onto the connected services that you want. And in some cases, it's through their UI. So it's an interesting way to think about, just the simplicity side and preference.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'm going to try and fit one more in here, and I think it may be a hot potato. So we'll see how you handle it or what you think. When we talk about advertising, metrics, viewership, how will advertisers have assurances on the quality of their metrics and measurement, given all the fragmentation that's taken place today?
I mean, it is a very fragmented marketplace. There is no one Nielsen, for example, that's going to have a single metric. You've got a variety of players, like you said, Paul. The data sharing collaboration is limited, so it really is going to be a matter of defining in what I believe is the provider that's going to offer you the diversity of audience. And the ability to reach the targets that you're looking for through, connected TV for your brand message. So technique is going to be important in terms of having confidence and significance and transparency into whether or not those initiatives or engagements were worthwhile.
Yeah, I think just coming in there as well, I completely agree. I don't think there is a kind of common way to approach that. But I think having solid analytics, quite granular analytics around advertising, as also around the viewer experience, is really essential on smart TVs. It can be quite difficult to measure the quality of experience that a viewer is getting at home through a smart TV, but having that detailed granular analytics to find problems, issues, or to measure their engagement is really essential.
I think the other piece of it is, and we're experimenting, and we've done some things in the past that have shown real results on connecting advertising performance with an action or some outcome, is we're working with the studios on our Fandango service where they'll run trailers or TV spots for movies. And, here comes up the QR code that's been around forever, but very effective. And we can then tie that back for attribution when a consumer actually activates against buying for a movie ticket for that movie. So I think attribution in a closed loop environment to demonstrate that advertising on smart TVs can actually deliver outcomes is an important piece of measurement as well.
Thank you, Mark. And I think I'll close this one up with an interesting, or I'll leave it with an open-ended question, I think, for the audience to think about, which is that I find this situation fascinating, where the advertising and measurement market for a lot of reasons has been upended over the last few years, and perhaps more recently. And we see some of that power going to people that are able to supply glass level data, right? So a lot of these streaming and smart TV platform owners, and I think it's driving a lot of innovation on both sides, both from obviously the platform owners trying to capture a larger piece of that measurement business, but also from those traditional companies being driven now to innovate further and faster. So I'm very interested in seeing that evolution take place over the next year or two. So we are up against time. Apologize for that, because there's a lot of really great info here. But I'd like to thank our panelists, Cameron, James, Mark, and Fariba. We appreciate you taking the time to share some great insights with all of us today. And we hope you'll join us again in the near future. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
And next, after a brief intermission, we'll have our fireside chat with Ashwin Navin of Samba TV, hosted by Parks Associates President and CMO Elizabeth Parks. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Since empty offices, video conferencing, and virtual events, working together in new ways, and finding unique ways of connecting with each other, we at Parks Associates are excited to see you face-to-face to collaborate, network, and innovate. We've brought back in-person conferences in 2022. Join us in May for Connections, the premier Connected Home Conference. In September, we'll be meeting again for the Connected Health Summit, Consumer Engagement and Innovation. And join us in December for the next in-person Future of Video, OTT, Pay TV, and Digital Media. We look forward to seeing you soon.
was a great conversation with Paul and those industry leaders really talking about, the future of video entertainment. There is so much to talk about, especially as it relates to measurements in advertising. And so we're very excited to bring in our next speaker, Ashwin Naveen, CEO and co-founder of Samba TV. Samba TV is an omni-screen advertising and analytics company and literally just finished their first new front. We're so excited to talk to you today, Ashwin, and I want to remind the audience that please go ahead and put any questions you have in the chat, and we will incorporate those into the discussion. So Ashwin, welcome, and let's go ahead and start and see if you could introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about where you just came from.
Hey, Elizabeth, great to be here. My name is Ashwin Naveen. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Samba TV. I'm joining you from the New Fronts. The New Fronts is a venue for advertising. It sort of happens at the time of the year when the upfronts take place. And for those of you who are television historians, will know that the upfronts is where major deals are made between media buyers at ad agencies and media sellers at the television networks, where they make major deals, that would probably have a term of about 1 year into the future. And this is about selling massive amounts of TV advertising to agencies that can then spread that out across all of their clients that they represent. The New Fronts is a window for digital media companies to come and play in that opportunity as well, to sell digital advertising in those types of transactions. They kind of operated in two parallel universes. Samba is at the New Fronts this year. It's the first time that we're presenting. And why did the IAB invite us? Well, it's an interesting year because this is the first year that measurement is making a big presence here at the New Fronts. Nielsen, Comscore, and Samba are the three measurement companies that are here. Many media companies, both on the buy side and on the sell side, are saying that this is a year where they embrace new currencies outside of the traditional Nielsen measurement currency. And of course, Samba was thrilled and honored to be invited and participate and share our insights with the marketplace. I think you're on. There you go.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Gotcha.
Okay, great. So yeah, thanks for sharing some of that information. And I bet that was a great opportunity for you all to share some of your new solutions and how you all are measuring and tracking viewers. So, the three areas that I want to cover with you today really are around the state of the market, the evolution of the business model, and then that brand building opportunity that comes as a direct result from advertising, as well as some of the technology that's getting incorporated, enabling new metrics and personalization of video. So let's start with the state of the market. And let me go with the big question of, is this streaming party over? So we heard, we've heard so much going on with Netflix. I just read last night that they are actually have a lawsuit pending over some of the information that they shared that maybe their investors didn't feel was, 100% accurate. And so lots of drama going there. So let me hear from you. Where are we at with this streaming party?
Well, I think it's fair to say that this is probably early innings in the streaming. I would say the streaming generation, and to say that this is sort of a doomsday scenario would be probably overreacting and over indexing on recent news. When you zoom out, what happened? Over the last 20 years, we've seen an amazing wealth of content and programming coming into the streaming window exclusively, and that only accelerated during the pandemic, where you see major investments, and not only among Netflix but also think of like the next tier of Amazon Prime, of HBO Max, of what's going on with Discovery Plus and its combination with HBO. Certainly Hulu and all of the Disney assets, Disney Plus, ESPN Plus. Yet Amazon take a swing at Thursday Night Football and take it exclusively. This is so early. What happened during the pandemic is also that we saw people can go to theaters, and so that whole window, which is a tens of billions of revenue for Hollywood, that whole window closed. What ended up happening in the pandemic is that we got movies that would normally appear in theaters exclusively get released into streaming day and date. That was if you went back 5-10 years ago and you said that a streamer could win an Academy Award, for against the traditional studios, you would have been slapped, to say something like that in Hollywood. But that's actually happening now. So to say that this is like the end of streaming, I think would be overcorrecting or overreacting. I think we're just getting started. Now, of course, we are now moving back into physical space post-pandemic. We are able to go to theaters again, but will it ever be the same? Our belief and our data suggests that we are in the beginnings of another chapter in the media landscape, and the streaming window is very much alive and well. It's occupying a larger share of our time. It's occupying a larger share of our wallet. Maybe it's reaching saturation levels in both regards, but certainly it's not going. That genie doesn't go back in the bottle.
Yeah, absolutely, and I would certainly agree with that, and we're seeing that within our research as well. I mean, consumers are not going to go back to the way things were, whether it's how they work or how they watch TV or even how they do their grocery shopping, right? Everything has changed, and technology really now has new value for consumers in so many different ways. But a lot of this bundling that we're talking about and seeing in different ways from these different entities speaks towards the unbundle and the rebundle, right? And that's all looking back to the cable TV days and how that unfolded. So, is that what's happening? Is this really just shifting dollars from cable TV over into the streaming environment, but also creating a much more fragmented market given the many options consumers have? What's your view there?
Well, there's tremendous value, in Netflix and other top tier streaming providers in the SVOD category. You get a tremendous amount of on-demand programming for a relatively low price compared to basic cable. So when you start to pair up, Netflix with, all of its competitors, with the Hulus and with the HBOs and others, you start to recreate a bundle, a la carte bundle, but it's basically people saying, I'm paying 10 to 15 bucks for each one of these. And when you add them all together, you start to get what was, the amount that consumers were spending on cable. And so, I think the value starts to dissipate because what's happened in the last 5 to 6 years is that all of the suppliers of programming to Netflix, major studios are now launching their own services. HBO vertically integrated with Warner Brothers and now Discovery. And certainly Amazon buying MGM. Like, these are the types of things that make it not a, one provider market like it was for decades, but maybe a handful, a small handful that in combination may represent $50 to $100 of your monthly content budget. But for the next chapter, we don't think that you can double that. You certainly can't expect that Netflix will double subscribers. They've got 65 million subs in the US. Many of those subs are probably sharing passwords with their family or neighbors. So you can't imagine that Netflix is going to double from here in subscribers. So the next chapter is about creating diversity in revenue streams, where you see Netflix saying, okay, we're going to embrace the ad model for the first time. Disney Plus did the same thing, replicating the success of Hulu that they've seen now that they own Hulu. And then Amazon does the same thing with IMDb as one, ad-supported service alongside an SVOD service in Prime Video. This diversity in revenue streams is a really important way for this marketplace to evolve and continue without further taxing, the wallet, which clearly might be reaching some level of saturation.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly consumers, I think, will be watching their pocketbooks more closely, especially as we have a recession looming and gas prices hiking and, really still some general uncertainty all around the world with some of these things. I love, though, that you went right into business models and that revenue and where it's coming from. And you mentioned the hybrid models and AVOD and SVOD and all that. But what about these different entertainment ecosystems that now are interacting together? So we saw, let's say, Netflix is now looking at gaming maybe as their add-on value add and imagine future revenue source. What other things are happening? Gaming seems pretty obvious, right? As far as the TV goes and the console and people being very engaged. But are there other things you're seeing that are really unique and new and different?
Yeah, I'd say, Elizabeth, it's a very valid point, that we talk about subscriptions and the fatigue or maybe the saturation of how much wallet can we take as an entertainment industry. Wallet share is clearly reaching that saturation point. The other thing that we should be talking about and thinking about is the fact that the only real scarcity that matters at the end of the day is we only have 24 hours a day as humans and as, living creatures. We only have 24 hours a day. And so the real scarcity that I think, we as an industry will be focused on is time. How much time can any one service or media company command of the consumer's attention span, which is finite. And, when you think about, well, we spend 8 hours at work and we spend 8 hours in sleep, you got 8 hours left that you have to use for food, family, fitness, and everything else. Like that window gets pretty narrow. And so, what we're talking about now is the fact that, video can occupy a certain amount. In our data, what we saw in Q1 was that out of the non-Netflix SVOD services, almost 2/3 of the consumption was happening with just one title. People were cherry picking the video that they wanted out of that service and then being able to, hop between services pretty fluidly. And that's not the paradigm that Netflix was built in. Netflix was built in a scenario where they felt a monopoly on your streaming video time. But, they acknowledged that YouTube was a major challenger. And now you have amazing programming from the next 3 or 5, SVOD providers that will command a share of your time based on the quality of the programming and the amount of investment that's going in there. So where's the blue ocean? Like that's clearly going to get more and more contested in the video category. Where's the blue ocean? Where's the opportunity? Clearly, gaming is another window of time that consumers have budgeted and allocated at massive scale across mobile platforms, across consoles. And, every major media company needs to be thinking about, what I think many are calling the metaverse, which is how do I take my franchise and my sort of position in one category of entertainment and expand that into something where that relationship with the consumer traverses screens and programming and starts to begin a lot more interactive and engaged sort of levels with the consumer. Netflix has certainly made its play into mobile gaming. It's a very early endeavor for them, but indicates they're thinking about our attention and how to grab a larger share outside of video. Sony dominating with its PlayStation platform and all the studio assets that it controls globally. You've got Microsoft making a massive acquisition in Activision, which now gives it a very, very massive amount of IP in gaming. And certainly like Facebook is saying, okay, the future of media is Oculus and Meta. Meta is the new parent name of the company. So this whole point here is interactive programming and gaming feels like the most sort of nascent and unclaimed area for these major media companies to expand into.
That's great. I really love the way you explained all that. But I want to ask you a little bit more on what this means as it relates to vertical integration. And maybe you could give our audience, a better understanding of what we mean when we say vertical integration in the entertainment space.
It's a great question. I mean, so in our view, there's companies that have really great consumer engagement with a single app or a single service. And vertical integration really just means how do you take the success of one product and expand that across, more consumer touch points and leverage the success of one, into an entitlement or a right to win in another one. And certainly, FANG companies are, excel at this. Like they have a massive amount of success with one thing that gives them a unique and unfair advantage in data, in consumer relationships, but also insight into what consumers are, doing with that one service, using that insight as a proprietary advantage to expand into new territory. And so it's about vertical, but it's also about horizontal expansion. Certainly, when you think about why does Comcast own NBC Universal, the studio, the networks, the streaming services like Peacock, that's about vertical integration from the pipes all the way through the programming and trying to figure out what economic advantage that has. But I think the really valuable currency we have to acknowledge, and one that really allows this kind of expansion to succeed, is data. Samba exists to be able to provide more transparency and data to the marketplace so that it doesn't get unilaterally consumed and monopolized by a small handful of companies. We stand for the democratization of data. I think in the previous panel, there was a discussion of why does there not exist a Nielsen for the streaming universe? Our position is it does exist. It's Samba. We have built a proprietary view into viewership, starting with a connected TV and then connecting through our identity resolution to other screens. But we're not going to monopolize this data. We are going to bring that data to the marketplace so that we can all win together. That innovation in this marketplace will require it being a team sport, and we stand for the democratization of this data.
Awesome. Those are great comments. All of these things you're talking about being vertically integrated do speak towards those metrics and being able to assure the entity, the advertiser, the service provider, what's happening in the background. And so, of course, we know that tech is helping to enable different things and create personalization to understand what's going on in the background, machine learning, AI, and really ultimately looking at towards the monetization of the platforms through the value of the metrics. So in thinking about that, what are some of the future services that you think will end up being a standout? And also maybe you could comment a little bit more on Samba's position of being able to do this, right? Nielsen hasn't been able to in some companies' minds, certainly in the industry view. And so what makes Samba's solution so standout?
Well, I would be, I want to acknowledge that Nielsen's doing some amazing innovative things with their business. They've had legacy success and sort of, sometimes with legacy success, that carries some additional baggage. But the fact is, they're great people, great company, great assets that they've, licensed, built on top of their legacy business. Certainly Comscore is doing a great job. Innovation in this category is a team sport. There's going to be various ways to approach the opportunity and measurement and insight. And what we're realizing is that we're not going to have a monopoly in this business. We're going to have to offer flexibility because our clients, the media buyers that are spending $75 billion on TV advertising and more than double that, globally on TV, they don't want to have one measurement currency that, works for everybody. Whether you're an automotive advertiser or you're a telecom advertiser or even a quick service restaurant like a McDonald's, like your needs will vary and your measurement methodology should vary, because you might be trying to get people to take awareness of a new product that you're launching, but it also might be that you're just trying to get people to install a new app or subscribe to a new service or buy something. And those needs will be different than someone who's trying to drive awareness at the top of the marketing funnel. And so it stands to reason that we need to offer choice. We need to offer the capabilities that, allow a marketer to choose what's the measurement that's most truthful and useful for their business needs. And certainly that choice means it will not be a monopoly marketplace in measurement and analytics in the future. There will be multiple methodologies that are meaningful and truthful, that are vetted, and that the buyers and sellers can agree to use as currency. And we're at the beginning stages of introducing a multi-currency opportunity for television. That's happening right now in the new fronts this year. There's 3 of us presenting, not just one. It's not just Nielsen, it's Nielsen, Comscore, and Samba presenting at the new fronts to give basically the entire buying and selling marketplace of advertising an opportunity to choose, from one of the currencies that matters and is meaningful to the business.
Yeah, really, really interesting times, especially when we talk about measurements and metrics. And agree with you, Nielsen certainly has a lot going for them. And as the really legacy player in the room, they're an outstanding company. But as we know, a lot of the legacy players have, and this goes in any of the industries. If you look at the utility industry, right, they can't just automatically orchestrate the grid to move energy around and make things work so that we don't run out of electricity. There has to be a lot that's done in the background to make their current infrastructure be able to mix well with, let's say, demand response and renewable energy and power sources. So, these legacy infrastructures, regardless of the vertical market we're talking about, it is hard to just add in innovation and make it all work, right? It's a huge challenge, and we see that in all the industries we study.
It's a really
I do want to touch on, as our last point, it's really amazing how quickly 30 minutes can go by. It's been a great conversation. I've learned a lot, but I do want to ask, what do you think these brands and the brand agencies, what are they thinking about all this? I mean, I'm going to guess they haven't figured it out yet, right? Because we're kind of in the middle of all of that. So what's your view on where these executive leaders are in their decision making, how they view OTT? Pay TV still is there too. 57% of households have pay TV. So, as we've noted in conversations, that's not going away either. So, what's the mentality for these the brands that are out there making decisions?
It's a great question, and I think to address your last point and this one at the same time, there's everything that's making the landscape for media exciting for consumers is what makes it challenging and disruptive for media buyers. Like the fact that we have so many amazing choices when we sit down to watch television today is what makes their job so hard, because they've got to figure out how to position their brands in this very complex and diverse landscape of media. Not only on the television, but on all the screens we use to watch video. And so positioning in that environment requires really robust data. It requires a robust methodology that can deduplicate the media consumption on one screen from another screen so that you can look at those holistically and optimize them, not after you spend the money, but actually while you're spending the money. Because I think we've all sat in this situation in our homes when you are watching video and you see the same ad over and over again. It could be in the same service. It could be as you move between services. That's not like an unusual thing. It's happening way too much. And it's because data is fragmented alongside our attention and our consumption. We need to make sure that our data and methodology is truly cross-platform. It needs to be real time so that, that you can be optimizing while you're spending your advertising budget. And it certainly needs to be robust to privacy and the changing landscape for data. There's a lot of companies that are lining up to be the new currency, the alternative currency to the legacy. But many of them don't actually own their own data. And I think that's a hazard. It's a hazard for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that the changing landscape and consumer privacy is putting an emphasis on making sure that consumers are comfortable with the data collection, that they've opted in, that they can manage their data footprint, that they have control over it. And, when you're buying data from N number of sources who are removed from the consumer's choice and visibility, that creates a hazard for media buyers who need to build the future, but don't want the rug pulled out from underneath them. And our view is that a table stakes requirement for the currency of the future, it's what made Nielsen so successful for decades. It's the fact that they actually engaged the consumer directly. They actually paid the consumer for their data. They created a panel with that data that the industry could rely on, that could do transactions against. The future is going to require that same level of consent from the consumers. It's got to be first party, and it needs to be robust and resilient over multiple years, and resilient to changing regulation and policy changes that are happening globally.
Well, great comments to end our discussion. Lots there. And you didn't say the word, but I'm going to say it, trust, right? Because this is a very important point across all of the research work that Parks Associates does with the consumer. Relationships are built on trust, regardless of who they're with, whether it's a service provider you're paying, the content company, your husband or wife or whatever. And so trust really is at the heart of the matter. Ashwin, I want to thank you so much for your time. I know you're very busy, especially today. So I very much appreciate you fitting us in and, really enlightening us with some of your experience and wisdom. I hope that we get to see you in person soon and appreciate your contribution today.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. And we will be right back. So stick with us. In just a couple minutes, we have a final session for the day and appreciate you listening in.
Parks Associates OTT Video Market Tracker service includes ongoing quarterly analysis of market trends and profiles of 300 plus OTT video service providers in the US and Canada. Consumers are service stacking and hopping in and out of services, paying for a program or season and then canceling when they want. As a result, the average churn rate for SVODs increased to 45% in 2021, a 5.5% jump from 2020. Now, 80% of consumers have an OTT service and 46% of them have 5 or more services. Subscription to the OTT Video Market Tracker includes comprehensive tracking of OTT video services like Netflix, HBO, YouTube, and Amazon, and smaller niche services. Our analysts update deliverables throughout the year, including a monthly update and quarterly subscriber estimates documenting service features, key service differentiators, quarterly subscriber estimates, pricing and business models, updates on existing players, and profiles and industry implications for new services. This research features a great new way to blend company profiles with industry research, data, and analysis of competing players' strengths and weaknesses in the space. To subscribe or request more information, please contact us at sales@parksassociates.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's Parks Associates Future video session, Maintaining and Growing Customers. Content is key to driving and maintaining subscriber engagement, and the lack of new original content in the OTT streaming service has the potential for reducing the bottom line. All OTT video services, particularly those that stake their value proposition in new original content, must be vigilant in how they manage their content pipeline. Coming up, industry leaders address the role of original and exclusive content, best practices in utilizing it to maximize engagement and stickiness, and solutions to retain and grow customers. I cannot be more excited to dive into this topic with our fantastic leaders in the entertainment streaming space. Before we begin, let me introduce myself. I am Eric Sorensen. I'm a senior contributing analyst at Parks Associates within the entertainment team, and I cover the OTT streaming media services and the sports media landscape. I've worked in sports, media, news, and entertainment for almost 20 years, and during that time, I've worked on partnerships, product development, content development, and digital streaming strategies. And I'm honored to be here today with you to discuss this important topic. So before we meet our panel, let me quickly introduce them. From Think Analytics, we have Peter Doherty, who is the CTO and founder. Also on our panel this afternoon is Philippe Gewelten, president of Crackle Plus. Sharita Johnson joins us, and she is the vice president of content and creative strategy at Peloton Interactive. Naveen Narayanan is the head of sports and data products at First Light Media. And last but not least is Greg Riker, who is the head of sales and business development at Comcast. So why don't we start with Peter? Peter, are you there? Welcome, and please introduce yourself and tell the audience briefly about what Think Analytics is.
Hi, Eric, and yeah, thanks for having me on the panel. Peter Doherty, I'm the founder and CTO for Think Analytics. We're a sort of worldwide leading vendor in the content discovery and personalization space. We've got customers in 38 countries around the world, and we have about 350 million viewers as part of our subscriber base. And really what we're all about is engaging the viewer, getting them to watch more content, show them the value for money from their subscription or from their ad-funded services, and also enabling targeted advertising to those viewers as well.
Thank you, Peter. We are excited to have you here with us today. Also on our panel is Philippe Gewelten. Philippe is the president of Crackle Plus. Hello, Philippe. Can you tell us a bit about yourself? And I'm curious what your definition is of Crackle Plus. What do you guys do?
Hi, Eric. Yes, I'm Philippe Galton, president of Crackle Plus. Thank you for having me. Crackle Plus is part of Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment, which is a pretty integrated company with three key businesses, and they're all vertically integrated. On this chart, you see on the right at the bottom, Chicken Soup for the Soul Television Group, which is really a production arm, includes a number of studios, including Alcyon, that produces content for Disney Plus, for Amazon and others. We also have activity in India, and we produce most of our own originals on our networks. In the middle, you find Screen Media, which is our content acquisition and distribution arm. They're in the business of syndicating content, have access to about 100,000 hours of content, have the international distribution through our Foresight Unlimited arm, and they've been acquiring libraries actually, so that they own their own content as well. And then Crackle Plus, which is our direct-to-consumer streaming services. We have three networks: Crackle, which is obviously the most well-known, Popcorn Flicks, and our new one, Chicken Soup for the Soul, which we just launched this month. And as you can imagine, we work very tightly. All three groups work very closely together to produce the best AVOD experience and bring the most content to our viewers.
Well, we appreciate you having you with us today, and I know you have an announcement to share with us, which hopefully we'll get to that question later in the discussion. But thank you for being with us today. Next on our panel is Sharita Johnson. She is the Vice President of Content and Creative Strategy at Peloton Interactive. Sharita, welcome. Can you share a bit about your background and what you're doing these days?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sharita Johnson, as Eric introduced. I Vice President here at Peloton. My background is content. I spent 25 plus years at ESPN, and after leaving there, set up my own agency representing on-air broadcast talent. And then I came to Peloton in 2020, the height of Peloton's popularity, to run their engineering, streaming, production operations, studio operations business. And then most recently came back over to the content side, getting back to my roots. Peloton, in case you don't know, is the leader in connected fitness. We have a community of over 5 million. We hit our growth spurt in the midst of the pandemic, where we actually grew our community members by about 500%. Also a fun fact, most people don't recognize that all of our content is original content produced in our 7 studios and 7 control rooms between New York and London. And out of London studios comes both our UK as well as German content.
Content on your plate. So I know you've got a lot on your plate these days. Well, we appreciate you joining us. Next on our panel is Naveen Narayanan, and he joins us from First Light Media, and he's the head of sports and data products. Naveen, thank you for joining us. What is First Light Media?
First of all, Eric, thanks for having me on this panel. I'm really excited to be here. So First Light Media enables cloud transformations for tier 1 media and entertainment and sports customers. So essentially, we enable the transformation through providing an OTT streaming platform that helps these organizations with challenges primarily around scale, complex workflows, as well as working with existing vendors in the technical stack. And some of the key differentiators that we bring to the table, unlike our competitors, is that we are a company that built a stack which is completely cloud native, so we can leverage all the functionalities of the cloud that comes along with being cloud native, that is extensible, accessible, scalable, etc. And then second point is being built on an open architecture. This allows us to bring best of breed third-party solutions and vendors to kind of fulfill that end-to-end over-the-top tech stack that enables transformation for our customers. And then a key characteristics of all the tier ones that we operate with is complicated workflow. No two customers are the same. So having built-in support for adaptable workflows that allow every tier one to kind of operate their own business is a key selling factor. And last but not the least, we take away the complexity of putting together an end-to-end over the top service, starting from the point of acquisition of signals all the way to distribution of contents on millions of devices that consumers have. So we take away the complexity, we own the responsibility to bring in all the partners and the vendors, and we help our customers in that way. So that's a little bit about First Light.
Well, we certainly appreciate you being on our panel today. Being at the intersection of technology, data, and experience is exactly what we're going to be talking about. So thank you for joining us. And last but not least is Greg Riker, who is the head of sales and business development at Metrological. And he is joining us on behalf of Comcast. So Greg, welcome to our panel and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, great. Thanks very much. Well, first of all, I think I'm going to have to stop doing these panels. Every time I'm on the panel, I see my forehead grow and grow and grow. So, I mean, that's a little bit scary for me. But, from our standpoint, Metrological, who was acquired by Comcast in 2019, we were an early visionary when it comes to OTT and the impact that it's going to have on kind of the customer base and really the MVPDs around the world. And our value proposition was very simple, and that was, to make it easy to bring these new services to the TV set, whether it's embedded devices such as a CPE or smart TV or even a game console. But back in 2005 when we were founded, it was it was a cowboy world then, and very complicated to bring these different services onto the TV set with the ability to have a navigational UI for the different services, subscriber management, content surfacing, search and discovery, all of those good things. And Comcast saw the value of that in 2019, brought us on board into their suite of products. And now we are just expanding the ability to really aggregate and bring over the top content to these different platforms. And, it's really all about the content, but and the integration of that content within the different services within the home. So I've been doing this a long time, and I think we've got really good experience. And from our standpoint, the growth has been great since the initial launch of us in 2005. So thanks for having us on board, and make sure you have a little bit of makeup on that forehead this time, I think.
We'll look to, maybe we can widen the shot so people can.
That's even better.
The hairline.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate all of our panelists for being here today. We have a fantastic topic to get to, so I want to sort of jump right in, and I want to thank all of our panelists for being here, especially giving up your lunch hour for some of you. So thank you. I know you guys are all busy in your respective businesses, but content is a very important topic in today's OTT ecosystem. And many consumers say that content is the #1 reason they subscribe to a service, slightly ahead of the price or good value for the money. So let's jump right in. Before we do, I want to remind the audience, we do have a poll question. And if you have questions for the panel, please put them in the chat, and our producers will help them get them into the discussion. So let's start broadly to get the discussion going by asking about content. And then we'll get into viewer acquisition, retention, and user experience and engagement. So streaming platforms are creating more exclusive content to carve out their niche and appeal to users. Let's start with Philippe. Philippe, will we continue to see more niche content, or do services need a broad approach to creating content in order to compete?
I think it's a combination of both, but I think even a broader offering, or like a Crackle, for example, which is kind of our general entertainment platform, is really the aggregation of niche categories, and the definition of niche varies depending on who you are. I mean, it could be classic TV, it could be Westerns, could be African American content. It could be really, reality TV. So, niche content is here to stay. We just acquired a company called 1091, which has a bunch of niche categories, from surfing to skiing to, UFO and other types of weird content. So there's value in all of these. I think the key is the mix of the content that you provide. And for us, there's no question that we need to offer a combination of the big driver titles, the ones that people are expecting or love to watch. A long tail library, which allows them to pick out of literally tens of thousands of content assets, what they'd like to watch, and increasingly original content, which is really, I think, what differentiates a service from another. And we can talk about what kind of content, but also how to provide it, because as we know, creating original content is expensive, and you have to be really smart and nimble and find ways to fund that content and make sure it works for you.
Sharita, sort of thinking about niche content, obviously, in your slide there, I think you said 5 million or somewhere around 5 million viewers, and how much original content you guys produce. But I wanted you to sort of share some of the challenges of creating or driving viewers to niche content and the service.
I think you have to find the audience, and the audience will find you. And I know that sounds kind of like a competing thought process, but you think about our platform, it is fitness, right? And so originally we started with just producing a small number of classes, and people started to find us. And then we had, the long tail of pandemic where people couldn't leave their homes. And so more people found us. And then we realized there's more than just the exercise of fitness. There's also mental wellness. And so we actually expanded into doing more wellness content and mindfulness content, meditation as well. So in terms of creating original content, yes, it is niche, and you'll have an audience that matches that, and then you expand from there. The key is not to move too far outside of your white space. As all of us know as content creators, that you can very easily get caught up in the sauce and start to widen your offerings, and then kind of lose track of where your original community is. So it's a balance somewhere in the middle there, Eric.
That's a great lead in to sort of my next question for Peter, actually, to sort of say, do we think that niche content continue to stand on its own, or are we going to see more aggregation of niche content?
Yeah, and I think, building on what Philippe and Sharita were saying there, one of the key things that can be frustrating for the consumer is if you have too many streaming services or too many OTT apps that you have to navigate and open individually to find things to watch. So there might be certain platforms you absolutely know that certain types of content are there. But in the previous fireside chat and what Paul was saying earlier, 46% of people have, 5 or more OTT services. And so I think that's where super aggregation can have an important role to play. Really to have that one consistent experience, so that you're not forcing the viewer to launch lots of different apps and try to remember where all the content is, and also make it easy for them as they get more and more content that is available to watch. It becomes harder and harder for them, or overwhelming, to actually find something. So I think making that discovery experience as easy as possible is very important. And of course, if you have a niche AVOD service, then you do need to show people that they haven't exhausted the catalogue very quickly, because they might not come back. You might get one visit for a particular show, and if you don't showcase the rest of the catalogue that you have that's valuable or interesting for that individual, it's not like having a subscription relationship where you may have other opportunities to retain somebody. They might just never come back, and you've got no way of contacting them.
Appreciate that. Certainly appreciate that insight. I know you listed the service stacking in the number of services. The other piece to that too, the other stat that Paul sort of shared, is that 80% of all broadband households have at least one OTT service. So we continue to see cord cutting moving in that direction, and a lot of people utilizing online as their traditional pay TV. One of those platforms is a vMVPD, right? And so the question that I sort of had here for Naveen is, excluding those vMVPDs, what role does the addition of live content play in today's OTT services?
Yeah, it's a great question, because with the emphasis on real-time communication, especially across social platforms, live is becoming a key differentiator that can actually cut through the clutter of all the viewing option that exists today. So, invoking that reaction in the consumer, like, hey, did you see that catch? I'm talking about obviously sports references. You see that touchdown? Like, look at that outfit that she's wearing for that gala. Those are opportunities where we can be in the moment. Being in the moment enables multiple other use cases, such as interactive watching experiences, where you are able to interact with fellow um, fellow people who are actually sharing the same moment at the same time. Community building use cases, and even gamification use cases, right? And all these live engagements and interactions also allow you to capture additional granular first-party data that you never had access to, because typically it's whether you watch the video or not. But now you're having multiple interaction points. This allows us to capture much more data, and then helps you personalize the experience for users through recommendations and personalization services. In addition to that, I also wanted to mention that live betting, especially on the sports side of things, is a big monetization opportunity for a lot of providers. Betting is getting legalized in 30 plus states in US. It's getting legalized in many states in Canada here, also elsewhere in the world. So how can content providers and right holders utilize this opportunity to take advantage of this completely new monetization channel? So those are some of the key advantages of adding live to an existing OTT service.
And Naveen, you hit on betting, which is actually one of the options in our poll question that might take us into the future. So if you haven't voted on the poll question, please do so. Greg, what are your thoughts on live content moving us into the future with OTT streaming services and growth?
So, hey, what we
Oh,
see is there we are. It's it's an absolute complement to the overall video experience. So it's got to be actually integrated within kind of your traditional OTT experience, meaning that it's got to be integrated into the user experience. And a little bit of what what Peter touched on, from our standpoint, we look at the challenges related to all of this content. One, I think there's this pendulum moving over back to super aggregation and really customers kind of looking for that one-stop shop, if you will. But it's all about how do you find that content and how is that content surfaced to you, because we are inundated with so much stuff now. So the need for personalization, the need for search and recommendation, all of these things, again, it's such a very important role when it comes to content and finding the piece of content that you want, regardless of the services or the service that it's being served by. From our standpoint, again, that's where this super aggregation is going to kind of flow itself in, not only with search and recommendation and personalization, but also possibly subscription management, password management, all of those things that are driving, for lack of a better word, the subscribers crazy. I think you're starting to see that pendulum, move back into this aggregation role. And from our standpoint, that includes live video, that includes live sports. And there's, you look at sports now, and betting, there's a game within the game now. So being able to support that, meaning that, people might not even be watching the live sports for the reasons that we all used to watch them. They're actually watching them because they've got, different action on the teams, or they've got fantasy sports. So integrating that all into that TV experience is what we're finding a very important driver going forward, and that's definitely something that we look at and are kind of moving our products in that direction as well.
Greg, you hit on consumers once they're in the funnel. Question for you related to, I want to sort of move a little bit to viewer acquisition, right? So how, what is driving a consumer sort of in the eyes of signing up for that subscription? What are you finding to be successful in that space, or what are your clients seeing?
Well, what we see obviously is content, right? It's content that's driving it all, right? And whether it's through these micro social networks or word of mouth or whatever or traditional marketing on this, the content's driving people to the service. And I think what you're seeing on some of these plus type of services now is in the early days of over the top, early days, whatever that means, it was basically dumping an entire season of episodes into the service, and people are binging and coming and going and churning and burning, if you will, and waiting till that next great piece of content coming back. But what we've noticed now is people are actually starting to trickle out these episodes, kind of back when you were waiting for every Wednesday for that TV show you wanted to watch. They're starting to a good example of that is, I think it's on HBO. HBO right now. It's Barry, I think, is the name of the series. But they're rolling this out, a new episode every I think it's every Sunday, something like that. But what that's doing is it's keeping the subscriber engaged and hoping for them to kind of drive and look for additional content related to what they like to watch. But I think we're seeing a lot of these new old strategies coming back into place to one, to keep the customer engaged, but two, to keep them from churning from the service, and that seems to be working. We'll see. That's a kind of a new strategy, a new old strategy that we're seeing that's happening.
Well, you certainly mentioned the key word, which is churn, right?
Yeah.
In terms of keeping the customers in the fold. But content-related engagement is key to starving off the presence of churn. How can this content be utilized effectively? And can it be integrated into the communication and marketing strategies that are tied to the businesses that you work on? I want to go to Sharita first, maybe, to sort of talk a little bit about your leverage of content to drive people in.
Yeah, it's funny, when Greg was talking, I was sitting here shaking my head. Yes, because what's old is new again, right? So we look at these new strategies of 5 years ago, it was like, oh my goodness, I can binge this. They're going to drop all the episodes of the entire season at one time. And then very quickly, we moved back to, well, how are we going to keep people engaged? We're not going to do multiple seasons per year. We're cutting it down to having only 6 episodes per season. We've got to spread that out. So here we are with the once a week philosophy that we knew worked. And I won't, in the 80s and 90s, I don't know, I wasn't born then, but I read about it. So it worked in the 80s and 90s.
Liar.
Peanut galleries talking
Thursday night must-see TV, right? So here we are again, trying to imagine how we're going to keep our subscribers engaged. And the truth of the matter is, their behavior drives our business. When they get tired and they want more, they're going to go away and do something else. So then we regret, we pull back and we go, okay, well, let's go to once a week. And that's where we are. We're finding that on our platforms, of course, people want more. They want more, but it's also very cyclical, right? There are times in the year where families are out, they're taking their exercise, they're doing their activities outside, they're less indoors and on their products. And so we have to pay attention to those metrics and find out, like, when do you ramp up? Back at ESPN, the summertime was our quote unquote off season before football. But then we found other things. We had Summer X, we had Little League World Series. You have to find time to keep your audiences engaged because they have so many options. And it won't be this one new thing that's going to take them away from you. It's going to be 10 little tiny things that are going to distract them and take them over somewhere else. So you've got to find ways to keep them engaged. You've got to find ways to keep them continually engaged. In terms of our marketing, we go where they are. Everyone knows that social media already has a built-in audience, and depending on the demographics of your subscribers, you've got to go where they are. TikTok is where you're going to find folks that are 20 something and under. Facebook is where you're going to find the older people, not me, some others that are, 50 plus. And so you've got to be able to build community where they already are. We've seen so many other businesses create communities, and some of them last and some of them don't. So my philosophy is you go where the subscribers and the consumers are.
So I want to throw this out to the group, and maybe did somebody want to jump in there? Or no?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Eric, I think with all of that, the cost of original content, I think we all know is we look at just the latest Netflix releases, right? And it's crazy to be able to sustain that, right? In terms of every one of these OTT players being able to sustain that original content growth pattern, because that's where I think a lot of this niche content comes around as well. You've got to be able to kind of surround that one hook with other shows, whether they're related shows or licensed content or whatever that happens to be. But original content's not sustainable for everybody, right? It's all about having a hook and then being able to build around that. And I think that's really important, and that's also allows you to retain those customers too. You start to understand their preferences. You can then begin to offer some other things that keep them engaged and not jump off to the next thing or the next best thing. And again, I think Peloton's done a great job of this, right? They've kind of expanded their offering, but it's still within that health and wellness kind of area, which is really interesting to see how they've grown with that, because most of I think all of their content is original content, to be honest with you, right? And so it's interesting to see how that you surround it with that, because you can't sustain it. And I look at NBC and the amount of dollars that are spent on original programming and Netflix and all these other guys. It's hard to maintain.
Yeah, I mean, we constantly say that the $1 billion investment in content only works if you've got subscribers that are going to watch it, right? You can't continue to invest unless you're growing.
Yeah.
Let me go to Peter real quick and sort of ask about personalization, search, discovery, and recommendations together to sort of hook the subscriber. What is sort of the level of satisfaction that consumers are seeing with that, or do we feel like it's working?
Yeah, I mean, I think even connecting that with the discussion we've just had on churn, I think the sort of churn prevention, a lot of customers are now asking about predicting churn. And of course, predicting who's likely to churn is important, but it's even more important to actually understand why they might be churning. And more important than that, do something about it before it's too late and actually prevent that churn from happening. And like I was saying earlier, I think that happens from the very first day, the very first interaction that a viewer has with your platform. Whether it's coming in from an internet search or they're subscribing, there could be information on the launch show that somebody comes to your platform for, obviously showcasing the breadth and depth of content that you have as part of the catalogue, using strategies like episodic content, not just releasing everything at once. And I think it's also important that every viewer doesn't react in the same way to every single use case or every single experience. So I think having a wide variety of different ways of presenting the content or different ways of engaging people is really important, so that you do engage your entire base. And that's where we've seen customers with like 80% increases in average watch time when comparing personalized content discovery and recommendations with editorial or generally driven carousels. Individual carousels on a homepage of an experience, driving more than 400% more views than other carousels on the page. And I think even things like search, I think there's a lot of people that think that search is a solved problem and that search is somehow easy or straightforward, or you just search for something and, you definitely find that. And I think if you look at the searches on many platforms, whether it's streaming platforms or MVPDs, I think in every single one, you'll be able to, there'll be a title or some content that you absolutely know is on that platform. And when you search for it, you will not find it. And so I think there's becoming a bit more of a realization that search actually needs more attention, and that the purpose of search is not to spend time searching. The purpose is to get somebody watching content as quickly as possible. Like we've discussed on this panel already, there's so many choices available. If you don't get somebody watching very quickly, then before you know it, they've logged out of your service and they're doing something else. So again, we've got other examples of customers where they've switched to the Think Analytics search, and it's over 300% increases in views just as a result of searching. And for one of our sort of major US customers, in a single month, that was over 17,000 hours of additional viewing time. You know, and who doesn't want that?
I think you bring up a really important topic about discovery and search for sure. You know, sort of the idea of getting the consumer in to watch as quickly as possible. One of those products that does that is typically a FAST or an AVOD service. And so I wanted to go to Philippe real quick and sort of ask the question about what is the primary the primary function in your mind of, you know, Crackle Plus or an AVOD or a FAST service in terms of viewer acquisition?
Well, first of all, the fact that we ad supported means our content is free, which is really the number one value for every consumer. And, you know, to us, seeing all these hybrid models of, you know, a little bit cheaper subscription, but you still see ads is really the worst case scenario for the consumer. And I think it's creating a lot of confusion and fragmentation in the marketplace. So being, you know, an ad-supported VOD platform is first of all providing free content, and it helps. By the way, advertising helps fund new content. You know, a lot of our originals are funded through brand integrations, for example. And interestingly, you know, one of our recent shows called Inside the Black Box, hosted by Joe Morton, which was all about Black entertainers and movie makers, actors, and their experience in building their career, you know, and facing sometimes, you know, challenges. Certainly, this show was funded by the General, the insurance company, and part of their rationale in funding the show was that it was a free platform and it was accessible to everyone. So I think there's that sense of democratization of content that is accessible to everyone. And by the way, it's also good for content owners because typically ad-supported platforms offer rev share deals for them, and so they do get an upside on the back end, which is typically not the case when they work with SVOD platform, which just pay them a flat fee and take all the rights away. So we found that it's actually easier to work with other content producers and or library owners as they get a piece of the action. By the way, on the FAST channel specifically, which we also find important, and we have a number of them, we think it's really the best way to promote the fact that our content is out there, but the offering obviously is very limited. So we see them as an opportunity to give a sample of our content and hopefully convince the users to go and download our apps, where they'll find, you know, thousands of hours of the same content.
Excellent. I think we've sort of bounced around. Anybody else have any other thoughts on FAST or AVOD services before I move on to retention? Anybody want to jump in there?
Yeah, the only thing that I wanted to mention here, Eric, is that, you know, we have already seeing strategies being made by media conglomerates to have multiple streaming services, including FAST and their premium service, which has exclusives, kind of complement each other. Paramount Plus and Pluto TV comes to mind, wherein, you know, you're able to launch that first episode of an exclusive for free on the FAST service, hence driving subscribers to their premium exclusive subscription service. So I see that, you know, in future we're going to see these complementary strategies where, you know, you're basically getting the customers through the door through an AVOD service with a large catalog, with lots of content that can fill their void space, and then really advertising to get them to upsell or subscribe to a premium service.
I mean, it sounds like something Netflix might do, right? Just sort of in the news recently, obviously, you know, the idea that there was a hint that they might launch an AVOD service, and the idea to sort of drive new customers, right, to continue to retain their subscription model. So let's move to retention a little bit. And one of those things, I know we've sort of hit on retention in terms of discovery and the user experience a little bit, but what strategies are OTT players using to retain customers? And Peter, I know you I wanted to talk a little bit about registration.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one thing on whether it, on an AVOD platform, particularly where you might have a completely unregistered user. Obviously, it's really important for those users where you don't know who they are, that you start that retention process immediately on the platform, just in case that person comes to watch that one show or one episode or one movie, and they then don't return to the platform, and you don't have any means of contacting them to even showcase any other content that you might have. So I think for those, whether it's AVOD or a fast channel, using personalization to say, okay, out of the thousands of hours or thousands of titles that are available on your platform, don't force the user to go and find them themselves, or the viewer. Showcase the best content as quickly as you can, so that even if they're there to watch a different show, you're giving them a hook or a reason to come back another time. And of course, once you can convince somebody to register, then you can get details from them, and you would then have the opportunity to do maybe outbound emailing or other means of contacting them, to highlight, again, using the data you've learned. So having that content intelligence, enriched metadata, we think is really important, so that when a user or a viewer watches even a single show, you're learning a lot, you're learning a huge amount about what they like, and also what they don't like. And so you can use that information and that deep metadata to find other content that's really relevant for that viewer. And of course, on an ad-funded platform, you can also then use that first-party data combined with the metadata in order to target adverts and the best, most relevant audience adverts to those viewers, so that the adverts aren't annoying to the person or potentially irrelevant to them, but even the ads on those ad-funded platforms are more and more relevant and more interesting to that viewer. So you're not only increasing your ad revenue through more minutes watched, but you're also maybe maximizing the inventory that you have, by targeting the adverts in a more relevant way.
And I think you're hitting on sort of the data points, right? And leveraging data a little bit to sort of retain that customer. One of the things that sort of also retains customers is thinking about loyalty programs, or creating a new subscription tier for password sharing. So, or refer a friend or something like that. Are they successful in increasing engagement and reducing churn? I want to go to maybe Greg with this one first. Are you there?
Coming to me first on that one.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I will say that a lot of our partners, OTT partners, are actually looking at different ways to restrict some of the password sharing. So I'm not necessarily sure that's a good retention tool, to be honest with you. From our standpoint, retention is again, it's about bringing the customer to the experience and giving them the things that they're asking for. I would say password sharing, formal password sharing could be a retention tool. I just don't think that from a market standpoint is something that a lot of the current streaming vendors are real excited about. I think what we're seeing is, password management and the ability to have single logon across multiple services, and again, subscription management can be a retention tool in terms of having a single subscription management opportunity. So I'm not paying $8 here or $7 here, $5.99 there. There's a lot of these different tools that are kind of being looked at to enhance the experience. But that's I think as a retention standpoint, there's a lot of activity going on around that, beyond just serving good content. It's are there other things that you can provide? And I think earlier, I think it was maybe one of the fireside chats when they were talking about gaming, is there other ways to incorporate other services wrapped around that? And I know that if you go on Netflix recently, they've included an entire gaming section now to kind of keep keep people happy and hungry. But again, I think from a retention standpoint, it's going to be expanding the services, making it easier to watch the content, making it easier to understand what's available to them. And I will pass the torch to somebody else.
So let's pass it to Sharita on loyalty programs, right? I mean, that's fundamental to your business, is it not?
It is word of mouth, right? So the loyalty program started out very simply, like if I refer you, then I get $100 in coupons that I can use on Peloton gear. That's kind of where it started. I know because I joined the company as a member in 2017 before becoming an employee. And this was before we popped up many of our retail spaces where we started selling products. It was just more a matter of how do we engage people? How do we get people to kind of to tell others about and tell family members about what our product is and what it's doing to change their lives. Because that's the other part of it. It's an experience, and people actually start to love our product through the experience of what it actually has done to enhance their lives. So there's that loyalty there. And then once they get into the gate, they have the content, which we all know content is king, and the deep, the stickier your content, the longer people are going to stay around. Then these additional layers of what I would say opportunities to bring new subscribers and new members into the community, they vary, right? They could be, get our product for 30 days without any payment, or a reduced payment for 30 days and see if you like it. If not, we'll pick up the product. Where we started was having the product with subscription, and now we actually have a full mobile subscription program where you can try it out for a reduced price and then use that product wherever you go. It's like having content in your pocket wherever you go, being able to exercise anywhere and everywhere. So what I'm saying is that there are multiple ways to engage and get new subscribers into the fold, whether it is incentivizing them, whether it is through word of mouth or sharing. There have been all kinds of things with reduced rates or free product, but buy the subscription. What we know in the end is none of these things will work if the content is not sticky enough to keep people. So getting through the gate is one thing, and we could all sit here and say, it's pretty easy, right? We're not sending rockets to the moon to get people in the gate. However, the secret sauce is being able to keep them there so that doesn't create churn. And that's where we have to get great.
That's fantastic insight. I think maybe Philippe, you probably also have something that is tied to this related to your business. And I think this is where I had penciled you in to share your announcement today.
Thank you. Yeah, this morning was our new fronts, and we made a number of announcements, including the launch of a reward program. And everything that Peter said earlier is exactly the rationale for it. We as a free service, we never force people to register to watch Crackle, for example. And on average, we have 10-15% of our audience that is registered when they watch us. And we tested in the past forcing registration, and we lost half of our audience because it's there's a commitment to register, and you need to make obvious their benefits for doing so. And so our reward program is going to reward our viewers for spending time on our platforms, and they'll earn points, and they'll redeem those points either for watching content without ads, actually, so getting kind of an SVOD experience on the platform. They're going to get the ability to watch free content, which typically would be pay-per-view on other platforms. Eventually, they're going to get discounts and coupons, and that's where our advertising relationships come into play, because there are a lot of brands who want to be involved with reward programs. And as we collect data, as Peter said, and we get to know them better, and we can then personalize the experience and really mix our usual curation of content. We have great programmers who would love to create content for our viewers, and they look obviously at what's available and what's popular, but not two-person want to watch the same thing, and so personalizing the experience is going to be a key part of that reward program. So we're very excited about it. It's coming up in the next 30-60 days with a beta version, and yeah, we can't wait to really offer more to our viewers, because it's one thing to offer them free content. There's a commitment on their part. We compete with anything that takes time away from their busy schedule, and so we want to maximize the value for them.
Well, congratulations on your new loyalty program. I think obviously driving your fans into the service through that program should prove success. I do want to take 1 or 2 questions from the audience. We have about 9 minutes left here, but here's one question from the audience. It says, for Think Analytics, or anybody else who wants to try to answer it, how has integrated search and recommendations contributed to increased engagement, pre or post? I wonder if that's pre or post COVID, or pre or post the user experience. Does anybody want to try to jump in there? Or Peter, since it was directed towards you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's no doubt that personalization can have dramatic effects on user engagement, getting people to watch a larger variety of content, more titles. I actually saw the results of an A/B test in one of our customers just yesterday or the day before, where they had done exactly that, and they saw increased purchases for transactional content, more hours or more minutes watched, and also a wider variety of shows watched. And I think that those are really vital things for the viewer. Like everyone on the panel has said, you can get people in the door, but you need to then give them a reason to stay. And there is so much content available on all of the platforms. It is really critical to showcase the best content for each individual viewer, not just one size fits all, or segmentation where 3 million people get the same treatment and a different 3 million get another treatment, but really being able to go right down to the individual. But I think also really important is the ability to A/B test what you're doing, to be able to improve your service, not 6 months or a year at a time, but to be able to do that very rapidly, to see what's working and what's not working, and whether that's what kind of content is most engaging for the viewer, or certain parts of your user experience are not working or are really working. That can obviously then inform even content purchasing and content licensing decisions as well. So I think that the real content intelligence combined with that first party viewing data that any platform is going to have, it can really turbocharge the user experience, the sort of churn reductions, and really showing people value for money. And again, on the AVOD platform, like Philippe was saying there, even if it's an unregistered user, certainly for us, we can still personalize the experience for users as well as registered users. And so I think all of that working together, again, it's about getting people to the point of watching as quickly as you can, and then showing them more. And the pre and post, maybe that was to do with post watching. So when somebody has watched a show, you can then recommend other shows. It could be the next episode. It could be something similar. It could be people who watched that show watch these others. So there's a whole variety of different ways that you can engage somebody. And again, I think it's about not having that one size fits all or only one way of personalizing the experience, because we're all different. We have different tastes. We have different ways of engaging with the content, or different devices, different user experiences. And so having that variety, but paying attention to the data, paying attention to what the viewer is telling you by their behavior, so that you're constantly improving. I think that's really fundamental.
And to add on to that, I think that's when you start bringing the role of the super aggregator into this, where you're starting to be able to surface content that you might not be a subscriber to initially, right? And that allows you to do some upsells, allows you to really bring that user into the fold of different services and different content, and that's really kind of from our perspective, we're seeing a huge value in that, and not only for the subscriber, but also for the for the content or the streaming vendors that are out there that might have this great piece of content, but it's it's just not known or something like that. If you can have this personalization and recommendation associated with it, allows you to bring that to the customer, and that's I think we look at that from a super aggregator as something very, very important as you move down into the future for sure.
Yeah, and one thing I just wanted to add is, looking at the consumption patterns from the audience, looking at deep content insights, you are able to recommend content, but you're also able to create specific packages. If you're really pushing on, one of the examples that we did was really understanding, for again, a sports example here, really looking at how many teams a particular person is watching in a specific period of time, how much time they're spending watching highlights versus full stream games, how many leagues they're watching. We're able to quickly identify that this person is a sports fanatic and this person is like a casual user. We have pre-identified certain groups, and then really offer up upgrade to a premium subscription package that probably allows them to give like multiple leagues in maybe 4K resolution for a discounted price, so that you get these fanatics to try out the best what the service has to offer and get them hooked on. So those are some of the additional things that we have done on top of providing recommendations as Peter was mentioning.
So I think that the use of data certainly plays an important part across all the businesses to not only recommend content, but to discover content. We are down to about 3 minutes left in our discussion here, and I do want to get to the poll questions and then try to see if any of our panel wants to provide some feedback on that. But our first poll question was, what will be the primary growth engine for streaming services in the future? And 56% of our audience said original content. 22% said licensed content, and then loyalty programs or something else. So, I mean, again, I think we've hit on content is king, but does anybody want to talk about maybe some of these other pieces?
I don't know if I can talk about the other pieces, but what I would say is that we all know that original content, as Greg said, is the most expensive entry point. Mm-hmm. Anybody that's building a portfolio knows that it takes a little bit of all of it, right? So if original content is your foundation, and then there's aggregated content or migrated content on top of that, and it's a little bit of all of these ingredients that's going to make the most robust, most intriguing, most interesting, most engaging portfolio for us to serve up to our subscribers and our users.
I think the answer is yes to all of that, right? I mean, I'll date myself with the Tootsie Roll Pop, right? With the original content.
Don't do it, Greg. Don't date
Don't do it. Too late. That sweet fudge center, right, is all wrapped around with all of this other things that are wrapped around it, whether it's loyalty, personalization, license, all of these things. I think the answer to and all, it's all of it. Again, still kind of adopting the different business models to support it, but I think at the end of the day, you got that core value proposition with what's bringing the customers to you, and how do you build out from that personally. So I think I'm really excited to actually see how Philippe executes on this loyalty program, because that will be interesting to a really litmus test in the market to see how that is driven. So congratulations on that one. But I think, again, all of these things are going to be really important, and there's going to be something else, right? I just, whatever that happens to be, whether it's, what Peloton's doing with content on the go or whatever these things happen to be, it'll be, we'll see where it shakes out. But, all of these things are going to have to be an important factor in the business, because as we see, the business is changing, and we've got to adopt to it. We've got to figure out how to hold on to those subscribers and keep them interested and happy, and keep them writing checks. Or Zen or Venmo, I guess. So we don't write checks anymore, do we?
Venmo or PayPal, I guess. Right.
Right.
So we are right at time. I know I had some more poll questions. We also had some more discussion that we wanted to get onto the future of the space. But I'm going to wrap us up here and just thank all of you guys for being here. Great insights from all of our panelists. Thank you all to both panelists, both of our panel sessions today. We want to thank everybody for being with us. We enjoyed all of your insights delivered from all of your different perspectives that you offered today. And we at Parks Associates and our audience are truly grateful for your time. So we really appreciate all of you guys being here, and I wish you guys all the best in your respective businesses. But thank you for your insights. We'd also like to let you guys heading out. Thank you very much. We'd also like to let our audience know that our next Future Video session takes place on July 21st, where we will cover the hot topic in today's OTT landscape, personalization and the new video viewer. So be sure to join us for that in July. If there's anything else, here's some other sessions that we have for you guys along with our July 21st session. Be sure to join us again throughout the year as we dive into a number of timely and relevant issues affecting the streaming video ecosystem today. And be on the lookout for our return to in-person Future Video events, which will be in December. December event at the end of the year. So a quick reminder, if you're interested in sponsorship opportunities for the upcoming Future Video sessions in 2022, if you're interested in inquiring about our research or speaking at one of our Future Video events, please reach out to Ashton, Jason, or Mindy Sue to discuss the possibilities in detail. Thank you again to everyone who attended, our panelists. Big thank you to our sponsors, and we hope to see all of you back here for our next Future Video session. I'm sorry that we ran out of time to dive into more in-depth topics, but thank you again, and please join us again on July 21st. Take care.